Three things cannot be hidden. Now this is according to Lord Buddha. A, the sun, B, the moon, and C, the truth. Good evening and welcome to Face the Nation. This is our quest to find the answers that matter to you. Our topic of discussion today is what should the citizenry expect from their candidates. We are joined by Dr. Pakisuthi Saranmuthu, Executive Director of the Center for Policy Alternatives, Dr. Mahim Mendes, Senior Lecturer and Specialist in Organizational Development and Governance. The journalists this evening are Nadim Majid on to my immediate right, Shahin Jurampati on to my immediate left, and on to my far left, as always, Faraz Shaukat Ali, who is an independent business investigative journalist. I will be also joined by Dr. Chandragupta Thenura, President of the Federation of University Teachers Association, in a short while from now. We start off our session this evening with Dr. Pakisuthi Saranmuthu. What is going on? The ball is in your court.
Well, what is going on is that we have a nomination process for the general election, and everyone is shocked, stunned, angry, frustrated, or immensely depressed at the news that President Maithripala Sirisena, as leader of the UPFA and at the SLFP, is giving former President Mahinda Rajapaksa the nomination. And there seem to be all sorts of moves afoot to prevent those papers being filed. We're told they have been signed, but they haven't actually been filed as yet. And I guess one would have more feverish activity and a lot of rumor and speculation in the next couple of days, 2 to 3 days, with regard to this. I think what we are facing here is, after all, a historic election. January was a historic election. This is the unfinished business, as it were, with regard to January. And I think the expectation, the hope of the vast majority of people in this country is that what began in January was a good thing. It should not be reversed. In fact, it should be concluded, even expanded and developed. And that, I think, is at the heart of the whole issue as far as this election is concerned. Is this still about governance, anti-corruption, accountability, restoring, institutionalizing and consolidating democracy in this country, or are we going back to the future?
Since the 8th of January this year, do you see progress made by the UNP-led government?
Some, but not enough.
How do we move forward?
How you move forward is this, is that the system of government that we have requires leadership at the top. It also requires a parliament, a legislature, which is constructively and critically supportive of the decisions of the executive, and when there is a need to, of course, comes out, resists and opposes. Now, we had an anomalous situation in January where you had a president come in with a legislature that was elected in 2010, had a two-thirds majority in 2010 under a previous dispensation. So things were out of sync, to put it mildly. This has to be corrected.
Why shouldn't President Maithripala Sirisena give nominations to former President Mahinda Rajapaksa?
Why should he?
Why shouldn't he?
Shouldn't he? Because he came out of that cabinet under President Rajapaksa. He was General Secretary of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party. He came out as a common candidate on the grounds that that dispensation was corrupt. It was essentially a dynastic project based on militarization, triumphalism, cronyism, etc. He came out and said that, look, my life is in danger, my family's life is in danger. Between the close of polls and the announcement of the election result, he told us he was hiding in some estate bungalow in Kurnagal or something like that. He has come out and said publicly that if he lost, he would be 6 feet under. Not only him, his family as well. So, I mean, everything that he denounced in the strongest terms, everything that is symbolized in terms of hope and expectation in January, and given that election result, giving former President Rajapaksa nominations is a flagrant contradiction of all of that. And that's all in the public realm. I mean, how does one support the candidacy of someone who you have come out publicly and said may well have been responsible for your death?
Thank you very much. That, of course, was Dr. Pakisad Saranamuthu, Executive Director of the Center for Policy Alternatives. I now move on to Dr. Mahim Mendes, Senior Lecturer and Specialist in Organizational Development and Governance. Dr. Mendes, you've been a strong critic of the previous regime. Are you satisfied the way in which Sri Lanka is moving forward?
Well, as Dr. Saravanamuthu rightly stated, there is unfinished business to be completed. And 8th January happened to be a decisive move, initiatives taken by the people to topple a regime that was absolutely unacceptable in terms of democratic benchmarks. Now, we certainly see progress. No one can say that there is no progress. That is a lie. And we, at the same time, want the new regime, we expected the new regime to move rapidly in search of greater standards, and whether they were able to achieve all what we expected is a good question. As Dr. Saravanamuthu said, they have to make enormous progress in that frontier. We expected the opposition also in Parliament to support the democratization process, which was not to be. And the people should take note of those who scuttled the process, created barriers after barriers after barriers. And that is something to be taken into consideration by the people. Now, at an overall level, we can be satisfied that we are in a process of progressive democratization. That, of course, I should say.
Dr. Mendes, you said no one can say that there is no progress. In which fronts have this government made progress in? What sort of progress has this government made over the last 8 months, 7 months?
Well, at an overall level, in the social, economic, political, cultural, moral, development process, we can say that there is progress.
The business community is not satisfied the way in which this government is acting right now, because there's anxiety, there's confusion in the market.
Of course, there is anxiety, there is confusion, that is as a result of not having a stable parliament, and that created so many unanticipated developments for which the government alone cannot be answering. The people expected the parliamentarians to be more proactive, be more realistic, be more conscious of democratic benchmarks. But they had guts to go against all norms of democratic behavior. We saw what happened in the 19th Amendment. We have to come back to the streets once again and compel the parliamentarians to do things in a more acceptable manner, acceptable to those who gave the mandate on 8th January.
How do you view the inclusion of former President Mahinda Rajapaksa in the UPFA nomination list?
Well, there is, as we all know, unquenchable thirst for power. Of course, that is his matter. The UPFA has so many parties. Most of those parties worked for him, campaigned for him. They were basically enemies of the presidential candidate Maithripala Sirisena at that time. And the UPFA being an alliance of many parties, of course, they had the right to say that Mahinda Rajapaksa should be included in the electoral, in the list, in whatever district. And I believe, though the decision that has been taken, I really don't know the final position, but we hear that he will be in the UPFA list, somewhere in some district. As I see Maithripala Sirisena as the president of the country, obviously had taken a tactical, strategic, political decision. And he obviously is a politician with enormous experience. He knows what he's doing. He has not done that in order to displease the people who gave him a mandate. UPFA has his own way of doing things. And in order to neutralize whatever damage that could be caused to the electioneering, the campaign, I think he had been given, or they have decided to give him nomination, we still don't know the correct position, in a particular district to come forward as a candidate.
Thank you very much.
I really don't know why we should be talking so much about a defeated political candidate at the last elections.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mahim Mendes, Senior Lecturer and Specialist in Organizational Development and Governance. I open the floor for the journalists to pose their questions from our two guests. We'll start off with Shahin.
Yes, Dr. Saravanamuthu, just early this week, the President said, quoting an encryption statement made by King Nisanka Malarada at the 125th anniversary of the Department of Archaeology, that those who steal state property and assets will in fact be reborn as dogs and crows in the next life. Well, this is a rather hilarious statement, because many of our previous MPs or so on and so forth who have corruption charges against them have in fact submitted nominations.
I know this is seems to be standard practice as far as our political parties are concerned. However, two things. First of all, I think it is unfair to convict people before they've gone through a judicial process. And therefore, it is a decision that parties must make. But I don't think that we should insist upon the argument that anyone who has an allegation against him or herself should be denied nomination, because that's going to open the door to a whole lot of abuse as well. You want to make sure that no one stands in an election. All you have to do is to come up with a whole series of allegations against them. The second point is that political parties, I think, really must decide on the quality and caliber of candidate that they want to put forward. And I think that's only going to come about at the end of the day if there is intra-party democracy. And I've said this many times before, you know, it's a great expectation with regard to a political party that may well be run as a personal fiefdom to expect the leaders of that party to run the country on principles of transparency and accountability. Yeah? So we need to ensure as citizens that sufficient pressure is put on political parties to come up with candidates who are unimpeachable, candidates who have competence in various spheres of activity, but most importantly, have a very clear ethical commitment to good governance and clean public service.
But then, Dr. Saravanamuthu, people are expecting candidates with a clean slate. This doesn't, when you have certain allegations against you, that doesn't essentially mean a clean slate, does it?
No, certainly it doesn't mean clean slate, but like the hymn, Nearer My God to Thee, nearer to the standard of perfection as possible. We are talking here, not just in this country. I remember, I think it was the previous Lok Sabha or the one before that, where something like a third of the members of the Lok Sabha had allegations of corruption against them, including ongoing cases. You know, so this is a phenomenon that happens all over the world, but that does not in any way excuse it happening in this country. We need to be able to get demonstrable commitment from political parties that they will choose people. I mean, again, this is also tied up, I think, with the whole question of greater representation of women in party politics and in parliament and in the other legislatures of the country. They don't come because they are not going to engage in the kind of skullduggery that seems to be required as far as political practice is concerned. So we need to move towards a situation in which, without having to pass laws mandating a political party to do X and Y and Z, where the membership of that party will voluntarily recognize the importance of ensuring that you have candidates who come as close as possible to the standard.
Dr. Mendes, I actually want to put this matter to rest so that we can move forward from this. Let's take a hypothetical situation. I'm going to draw on your expertise in organizational development. Let's take this hypothetical organization where you have the chairman of the organization has either retired or been put into retirement by the board. When this hypothetical chairman opts to return as a middle manager or a junior executive as best, what does it tell you about the organization itself?
Well, it's not a good reflection of that organization in the first place, because no one is indispensable. You see, we know very clearly that there needs to be better talent in a political party, in organizations to thrive, to develop, move forward. There should be better talent. And we are talking about people in the political process who have been very decisively rejected by the people. That is at an overall level. And in such a situation, I do not think that we are witnessing something progressive when political parties try to promote candidates who have already been rejected at the highest level, that is in presidential office, bring them once again into the parliamentary elections process. Very specifically, this particular case
in this particular hypothetical
has
organization
implications, because we are talking about a presidential candidate rejected and now brought once again into the parliamentary elections process.
Dr. Mendes, getting back to the topic of our conversation today, most of the nominations have already been finalized for the major parties. So we're going to see a lot of old faces as well. What should the citizenry be expecting from these candidates? What should they be asking for in the run-up to the election?
By this time, the citizens of this country, all the people, voters, the non-voting population, the youngsters, they all know what has gone wrong with the Sri Lankan democratic process. That we have had parliamentarians, members of the legislature, who very clearly lacked decorum, dignity, honor, public accountability, no sense of social responsibility, and they made a mockery of themselves. And it is fundamentally important for a flourishing democracy, for democracy to flourish, that the citizens take note of what went wrong and ensure that in every district, well, in line with whatever political affiliation they have, elect people who are fit for enlightened public policy formulation. That's fundamentally important. People without questionable reputation. People who have proved themselves. Well, of course, you know what is happening in countries like Singapore. They go in search of people. I'm not saying that we should be replicating the Singapore model, but those countries in post-independent period move forward because they were interested in quality thinking. People with right credentials able to make a formidable contribution in legislature for futuristic policy development. The people of this country very clearly need to vote for people who are fit to be in the legislature. People, of course, with tertiary literacy. This is a country where the large mass of people have not received tertiary literacy.
Faraz,
boasting of...
Faraz, we'll go on to Faraz now. Faraz, yeah.
It's almost ironic. Dr. Saravanamuthu spoke of a need for unimpeachable character. And Dr. Mendes, you've just said questionable character. And therefore...
unquestionable character.
Yes, so therefore it just goes back to my almost specialist subject of the central bank. John Exter said that person of whose character has been questioned should never have that job. Here we have a government led by Mr. Wickremesinghe, the Prime Minister, who purports to have these high, lofty ideals. But we have a situation where they in opposition, they told us that 7.5 billion rupees per kilometer of roads was too much. And yet we have records to show that this government have awarded the same contract, the Outer Circular Highway project, to the same contractor for the same amount of money. They just changed the scope of work, they saved a bit of money, and without the tender, they awarded it to the same contractor. Now, where's the good governance? That's just one point. So the people seem to be very unfortunate.
Dr. Mendes, if you could answer that question, I think if we allow for us to make a statement here, it won't do right. So you could answer that question, Dr. Mendes.
Well, it is irrespective of the party in power, irrespective of the government, well, it is important that they respect proper checks and balances. And I cannot comment very specifically on what you are saying, because I do not know the credibility of the story, you know, what you are saying. So therefore I will not specifically comment on that. But the principle is very important. We are talking about parliamentary candidates and people in high office. As Dr. Saravanamuthu rightly stated, we need to have very high ideals. We need to get closer to very high standards. And you were talking about central bank issue.
Yes.
Well, we can't just go by stories. Well, we know that the COPE process, the COPE report, was not properly finalized, and that has to be, those investigations have to be properly revealed. Until such time a proper credible report is out, I think we should not be unfair by those people who have been accused and telling the country that they are guilty.
So
we should not be saying that.
So until that time, the people of Sri Lanka should be mugs and continue to bear the losses. These losses were estimated last week at 53 billion rupees. Obviously money that we can't afford.
Yes, what I'm saying is not that the people should be at the receiving end of irresponsible decisions of any political party, but I'm talking in terms of the principle. It's very important that they do not leave room for anyone to point fingers at them, and if there are charges leveled against any public official, parliamentarian, well, they need to be properly investigated, and until such time the due process of law goes into operation and people are found guilty, we also should not be judging those people. All what I can say is that it is a good lesson for all political parties to ensure, at least in the new administration, that they do not confer, you see, high status positions to people with questionable reputations. I'm not talking about central bank governor. I'm telling you that we have to wait for those reports, but it is in the highest interest of democracy, representative democracy. It's in the highest interest of an enlightened citizenry that all parties maintain very high ideals with regard to checks and balances.
Clearly.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mendes. We are also joined by Dr. Chandragupta Thenwara, who is the President of the Federation of the University Teachers Association. Dr. Thenwara,
I'm an ex-president.
with regard to how Sri Lanka is moving forward, you've been very vocal. Your organization has been very vocal with regard to the intellectuals in Sri Lanka. Are you satisfied the way we are moving forward?
Yeah, it's questionable. Questionable things that because still we don't have a clear idea what's happening around us, because still we don't have proper parliament, because we are waiting for it, and that is why we can't say still we are governing by the government. So like a temporary government, under the temporary government we are doing things now. That is why there are a lot of promises, but still they are remaining as a promises, and still we are fighting, and we can't still fight our fight again, go back to the 6% things, and still we have no government to talk properly, and that is why we are waiting for the new elections, and then we can move forward.
Dr. Thenwara, you were talking about there's no one to speak properly about what is going on. Our topic is what the citizenry should expect from the candidates that are going to be contesting this election. When you say speak properly, what exactly are you looking for?
Because we elected the only president, and we are waiting for the new election.
No, I mean, what are you expecting from the MPs who will get elected?
Yeah, because they have to have a proper commitment, and they have to keep their promises if they are going to give promises, and they shouldn't have there should be actually proper intellectuals and no rogues, and their credibility to the people, and who can work with the people, and who can listen to the people, and who has kind of culture and understanding of what's happening around us and needs of the society. And then
what should the people be asking them for? I mean, what should be the priority at this time? Is it the economy, economic policy, or is it constitutional reform? What is it specifically that the people should be asking for from their candidates?
I think the constitutional reform was the priority, because we went under the regime, executive power, presidency. We want to change it. That's the main thing. And other things are the, Right to Information Act, and, those other acts. We have to have that. Without those things, we can't move forward. And that is why our priority was the change of the constitution.
Those things should come before actual economic or business decisions?
Because those are the normal things anyway. Is there the government or not, anyway the people are working like that. But without constitution, proper constitution, we can't go forward.
Dr. Saranamuthu, before we go in for a short commercial break, you've been advocating good governance for a long period of time. I remember since 2009 you've stressed on the fact that reconciliation is important. Last 8 months, what are your thoughts about good governance? Have we practiced good governance in Sri Lanka?
I think we practice good governance in stark contrast to what went on before. However, in terms of the standard I think that we should be setting with regard to governance in the country, we did also fall short. But in that sense we made progress, but that progress, in my opinion, was insufficient and inadequate. And that's why I say that what began in January 2015, there is unfinished business, and this is what this general election is all about. And again, in response to that general question of what would I expect from members of parliament, I would say, first and foremost, I want integrity and vision from them. Integrity, because without that, you're not going to get good public service and good governance. I want vision from them because they are going to be elected members of the Parliament of Sri Lanka. Once they get there, they're just not from Mathura district or from one particular polling division or indeed from one particular political party. They're there to make decisions on behalf of the entire country and all of the people within it. So they have to have a vision, right? And in addition to that, yes, their expertise in a particular chosen field and experience, is going to be important. But I think when one looks back at it, you look at parliamentary democracy, people always talk about qualifications with regard to people who should be elected. People then also indeed talk about qualifications for people who ought to vote as well. Because you need an intelligent person, presumably according to that rationale, in order to know what another intelligent person is. However, look at it. In this country, I would submit to you that this country has been messed up by people with degrees and supposedly good backgrounds, and saved at the end of the day by its vast masses. India, in 1975, when Mrs. Gandhi instituted the emergency, she was kicked out by a semi-literate electorate. The vast majority of them would not have been allowed to vote in some instances, and certainly would have been eligible to be members of parliament. So there has to be a faith in humanity, and there has to be the importance about integrity and ethics is that you need to have a sense of right and wrong.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saranamuthu. We now going for a short commercial break. When we come back, our topic of discussion today is what should the citizenry expect from their candidates. Stay connected, stay with us, we will be right back. I got it wrong. I got it wrong. Welcome back. This is Face the Nation. Our topic of discussion today is what should the citizenry expect from their candidates. We move on to Dr. Mahim Mendes, Senior Lecturer and Specialist in Organizational Development and Governance. What is the responsibility of the General Secretaries of respective parties to opt out the corrupt from the nomination list?
It is fundamentally important. This is something that had been lacking, and we have been lagging behind in this matter. Internal democracy in political parties. As academics, we have been stressing over and over again that there should be internal democracy, and within the party it is important that they respect the highest principles with regard to this matter. It is important that they have a proper conscience. If they don't have democratic principles in mind, obviously it will be difficult for them to make right choices when it comes to picking candidates to represent the large mass of people. So it is very important that general secretaries, not just general secretaries, all those people holding high office in political parties be very conscious of highest principles of democracy and pick candidates who will fit the bill. It is very important that they provide those checks and balances. They cannot wash their hands off this process.
On the 17th of August, what must the people keep in mind when they go to the polling booth?
Fundamentally, of course, the political party affiliation, of course, is up to the people. Political parties well-pleasing, whatever party is well-pleasing to the people pick. But within the party, we are talking about the old system, preferential voting system and all that. It is important that they make a deliberate, a conscious effort in picking people with dignity, decorum and honor, and people who have not in any way aiding and abetting the process of polluting the democratic process during the past few years.
Where do you see Sri Lanka after the August 17th elections?
After August 17th, well, of course, we all, on behalf of the citizenry, we all can say that we expect a better country through cleaner parliamentarians, people who will be more conscious of the democratic process, who understand the significance of democratic rights, obligations, respect the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that itself was made a mockery by the past regime. They were doing fast unto death in the United Nations compound. President himself was encouraging people to go and protest against the UN benchmarks. We were questioning the UN on those matters. So it's very important that people pick candidates who are fit enough to understand the significance of those benchmarks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mendes. I now move on to Professor Thenwara. I'm very sorry for addressing you as doctor before.
No, yes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saramuthu, for correcting me there. Professor Thenwara, President of the Federation of the University of Teachers Association. Pardon me, Professor Thenwara, to be very honest. I'm very sorry for that mistake. Professor Thenwara, with regard to FUTA, I recollect a few years ago, you all were very vocal about how Sri Lanka was moving forward with regard to your salary increments, so on and so forth. I recollect 2013, Dr. Mendes was also very vocal about getting the required salary increment for the intellectuals, the teachers, the lecturers at universities. Suddenly, you all are silent. Do you all fear someone? This is good governance we're talking about.
No, the previous government gave only money, without any corrections of our salaries. You know, they hang a lot of money around our basic salary. They didn't increase our basic salary. Still questions are there. because we have to fight again, I think, with the new government, when the new government elected after August 17th. I think this is the transitional period. That is why we don't have things to fight. But we, after that promises, and we change our. That means we came to the point that we have to involve in the change in the government, change in the country to the better position. That we saw that there are a lack of democracy and corruption everywhere. Then we have to not only think about our salaries, and then we have to vocal about say things about what kind of country we need. That is why we were talking about it, and then they promised and they gave us money. So, but
is your organization supporting any political party?
No. Every member has their own right to take any party politics. But we, as an organization, not as a FUTA, but as an individual, we promoted the democracy. We need that democracy. We wanted that regime out, because it was the corrupted regime ever we had.
But you are aware that nominations are going to be given to former members of parliament from the United People's Freedom Alliance as well as the United National Party as well. How do you view this?
It's so sad to see that, because we have to think about when without party politics and color of the party, we have to think about what kind of person they are nominating and their history. We have to go back to their history. If he is a thief, don't elect him. And if he is abuse power, don't elect him. So those are the things we have to say now. And if they are not listening to our wish, and we want to change this system, and we need good people to come to the parliament, so then we can decide, not by the party. And we have power. As voters, we can change, because we changed that regime even January 8th without party politics. That is why we don't have to think about the parties now. We have to think about the best candidates. That's the only decision we have to make.
Thank you very much, Professor Thenwara, President of the Federation of the University Teachers Association. I now move on to Dr. Pakisod Saranamuthu, Executive Director of the Center for Policy Alternatives. Dr. Saranamuthu, must Sri Lanka fear the September sessions of the United Nations Human Rights High Commission in Geneva in terms of this election as well?
No, Sri Lanka should not fear anything coming out of Geneva. Let's remember, in this international organization, in this international forum, a resolution will be passed on the conduct of a particular government. It's not an indictment of a country. In effect, it's an indictment of the conduct of a particular government. And in this case, there are allegations with regard to war crimes and crimes against humanity. So Sri Lanka as a country doesn't have anything to fear. If we take on board in a constructive spirit whatever criticism that is made, then I think we can build reconciliation, we can move forward, heal our wounds and move forward. So there are certain politicians, there are certain groups in the country, certain individuals in the country who may well have things to fear coming out of that report. But as a country, I don't think we have anything to fear.
Can the Geneva sessions be used as a weapon by politicians at political stages and talk about these sessions with regard to what happened during the 8th January campaigning as well?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that was why the new government elected in January asked for the deferral of the report, which is supposed to come out in March, asked for it to come out in September. I think there are going to be political factions in this country who are going to run on an explicitly racist, communalist platform. They are going to talk about minorities having disproportionate influence in this country, being part of conspiracies with other countries for regime change, all of that kind of thing. So they will jump on that report, take it out of context quite possibly, pervert it in that respect for political gain. And I think that is why civil society and other political parties have to be very clear in their commitment to putting this in perspective and meeting distortion of the truth head on and pointing out very simply that, okay, there are criticisms of what was then the government of Sri Lanka, and not only just of the government of Sri Lanka, it will be the LTT as well. Now, do we as a country face these things together and come out stronger because we have faced some very ugly truths about ourselves? In order to be able to reconcile, what do we need? I think we need the truth first.
Dr. Saramuthu, before we move on to the questions from our journalist, must the people fear this report in September?
I don't think the people should fear this report at all. I think this report is integral to us moving forward.
Must the former regime fear this report?
I would think the former regime will have to. After all, there were resolutions in the Human Rights Council when the former regime was in power in 2012, 13, and finally in 14, mandating that this investigation be carried out.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saramuthu. I open the floor for questions from our journalists. We'll start off with Faraz.
What can the people do when they are faced with, you said you need inter-party democracy.
Intra-party.
Intra-party. We have the leader of the UNP who was hung on to power after several electoral defeats by the expediency of adjusting his party constitution and so on. So when people look at this from far and say, look, I need to choose, how can you choose a party that lacks democracy within itself?
That is why I said that at a general level, with regard to the principles, well, it is very important that political parties believe in intra-party democracy. Similarly, the people need to be extremely conscious, especially the party activists. People who are followers of parties need to be very concerned about the manner in which political party leaders conduct themselves, and whether there is scope and space for dissenting views, for constructive criticism, for a party to move forward. Major reforms within the party are very, very important. When people say that they should not be considered as enemies of the party. So this is a matter for all the, not just, you mentioned a particular political party. I would say very clearly that all political parties in this country, whether they belong to the ideological, whether they be in the socialist camp or the liberals or whatever, they need to take the principles of democracy more seriously. They all very clearly lag behind.
Dr. Thenur, sorry, Professor Thenur, I must apologize for that. It was a lapse on my part. I must take responsibility for that as well. I mean,
you don't have to.
Professor Thenur, what I want to ask you is there's something interesting that Dr. Saramuthu was saying about how intelligence or academic qualifications should not be the only yardstick by which we measure our politicians. That integrity, ethics, and values, core values, need to come into play. In this day and age, how can you tell, when you have a list of 15 candidates put in front of you, how can you tell which one is ethical, which one has integrity? How are the citizens of this country supposed to pick out those specific candidates?
Because I think people have to look at the what kind of acts they did before that coming as a nominated person to that particular party. So then we have to go back to their history and what they are doing now, and are they still going with the entourage of kind of security and not be merging with the people. So then don't elect them. And so those kind of things we have to think about without fear, they have to move with the people. And other thing is when the degree qualification, I think we had a lot of professors in the previous government. We know what they did, and even law professors and various professors. And so I think the professorship or doctorships is not concerning here, but here is very important of what they do with the people, what they are doing with the party, and what they are talking about. Are they concerned about the wealth of the country, and are they think about the intercultural thing or multi-ethnic society, how they reacting to the other peoples, and are they listening to the others, and are they labeling other people like Tamil or Sinhala or Muslim? Those are the people we have to think about when we are going to elect them.
But Professor Thenur, also when you look at a candidate's history, I think this is another point that has to be made, is that you will see a long list of accusations, but very few, if none, in terms of convictions. So are the people supposed to assume that because they have been accused of so many wrongdoings that it must be true, or are they supposed to wait for a very notoriously slow judicial process to convict people?
They can elect new people. Don't think about them.
Don't think about the old people.
Go the newcomers and elect from them and test them, and rather than go behind the other past.
Dr. Saravanamuthu, I'd like to move on to you. You were talking about militarization under the previous regime. This is a point that was brought up in the run-up actually to the presidential, a few months before the presidential election last year, on one of our programs on MTV Vantage Point. Dr. Dayan Jayatilaka was saying that the regime, the state, has been hijacked by a deep state. Do you agree with that point of view? Was a year ago, had Sri Lanka been hijacked by a deep state, a military state?
I think Dr. Jayatilaka is probably best able to explain his fears and suspicions. But as far as I'm concerned, there was nothing particularly hidden with regard to it. It was quite blatant. It was a dynastic project underwritten by militarization and authoritarianism. And its one claim to fame was that it won the war, which had been going on for 30 years.
Do you think that's still going on, though, the process of militarization? Do you see any, over the past 6 months, have you seen any significant scaling down of the militarization that took place, as you say, over the past 10 years?
Insufficient.
But there has been
some, in the sense of there has been land that has been returned, taken by the military and returned now to civilians. The governors of the northern and eastern provinces are not people with military pass. They are civilians who have been and always been civilians. But I would like to see more of this happen in terms of the military being taken out of the day-to-day administration and governance of the North and East. But the other day, a friend told me, I haven't seen the actual magazine, that there was a sort of a piece on hotels in this country and golf courses run by the services. Now, I want to see the services out of running hotels and golf courses. That's not their job at all. They should be divested. Where does the money come from? And where does the money go? These are questions that really, you guys should get the parliamentarians here and sit them down and ask them.
Do you think our MPs are fearful of asking these questions?
Pardon?
Do you think our MPs, do you think our elected public representatives, representatives of the people, are afraid of questioning the military?
Less so than you guys, I think, quite frankly. Less so than you guys.
Dr. Mendes, do you think
It's a good response.
the President is living up to his pledges that he made on the 8th of January this year?
Well, I should say that people have not shown acute displeasure over the way things have been happening with the new president. Not to give a character certificate to the new president, but there have been certain weak areas. And the people who are a little bit more analytical understand what created those problems, what caused those problems. So at an overall level, we see the type of language used in communication process by the President is a sober style of governance, communication for good governance, and he had been extremely proactive to the needs of the people, especially with regard to people who were living in fear, and he made more friends, as it is, out of the citizenry that elected him, more confidence gained by his conduct since 8th January. I do not see any situation where he has undermined his whatever expectations that the people had. He has gained, if at all, as a sober-minded politician.
Dr. Saranamuthu, you said that the president wanted to overthrow the previous regime because it was corrupt, and that is why he was contesting the presidential poll, and he emerged victorious. Do you in any way believe that the president had betrayed the 6.3 million voters who voted in favor of him?
Well, I will give a categorical answer to that when I hear from him his rationale and explanation as to why he has given the nominations that he is supposed to have, that are being talked about. We haven't heard anything from him. So we're all speculating as to why it is, and we are all trying to sort of come up with as imaginative explanations for why this is the case, and not. I mean, we must hear the man talk. And I would appeal to you all, bombard the presidential media unit, or wherever he lives, and get him to answer that question. Why did you do it? Who is asking him that question? We're all asking each other that question. But is the media asking the president why he did it? It's the biggest news story in the country.
He's the chairman of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party and also the leader of the United People's Freedom Alliance. In order to ensure that the party stays together, he may have taken this decision. Is that a justifiable answer?
I go back to what I said before. I think you guys should be camping outside his house and catching hold of him and asking him that question they're asking me. No, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, no. When Maithripala Sirisena decided to be the common candidate in November 2014, presumably he thought about all of these things, about dividing his party or uniting it or whatever. The issue here is not the fate of this country is far greater than the fate of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party.
Would you be surprised to see the former president and the incumbent president getting onto the same stage and campaigning?
Would I be? Indeed, I would be surprised. But in politics of this country, anything can happen.
Anything is possible indeed. Shahin?
Dr. Saranamuthu, from your point of view, how would you assess or rather compare the current political system in the country, which for the past 10 years, in comparison to the past 7 months rather, up to now? How would you compare it?
Well, I mean, I think, after the election in January of this year, a couple of things did happen. The first one was, I think, and you can't quantify this, but it is something we all know, that generally across the board, there was a greater sense of relief and freedom. People began talking about things which they had self-censored themselves from talking about, much more openly.
So would you term it as somewhat okay, better or worse?
The situation now?
Yeah, the current situation.
It's considerably better. It's considerably better. But, as I said, anything can happen in this country's politics. We are perilously close to it also being reversed. That's why this election is so vitally, crucially, critically important. Because what you have is that you have opened things up. And secondly, in terms of a substantive change, any progress towards whittling down the powers of the executive presidency is good for democracy and governance in this country. And the 19th Amendment, flawed though it is still to be supported.
Professor Thenur,
give me a second, Shahin.
Dr. Mendes, with everything at hand, do you think that this current government has neglected the economy of the country? Because now yesterday, Deputy Minister of Policy and Economic Affairs said that the growth rather of last year was 7.4%, but actually it's 4.5%. that isn't good news either. So how do you assess the economic development in the country right now?
Well, as I told you sometime, in the early stage of the questions, very clearly, stability of government has a major impact on the economy. Not only the economy, the social economy, political, cultural process of development. So, at this moment of time, what I can say very clearly is that the regime which was changed and the new regime that came into being tried its very best to restore order into all these sectors of national life. And with the parliamentary elections, there will be greater stability, very clearly. And what I can say is that we cannot pass such a negative judgment on the process of economic development during the past 7 months, because there were many unanticipated developments. So, I cannot say that they have messed up the economy during the past seven months.
I'll actually rephrase Ryan's question for all three of you. Can a government, any government, SLFP, UPFA, democratic or undemocratic, can any government afford to put the economy on the back burner while pursuing structural reforms?
Let's pose that question to Dr.
Professor
Tenora.
Yes.
I'm not the I'm not the expert on economics, but
No, but given, what you've seen in the country over the past 6 months, and how, for example, the camp of President Mahinda Rajapaksa is harping on the fact now that the economy is in shambles, is what they say. So given that, and given how Dr. Saranamuthu is also saying that we are now perilously close to the whole January 8th victory being reversed, can any government really afford to put the economy on the back burner while pursuing structural reforms of the country?
I think we have to do structural reforms. Without that, we can't move forward. And the thing is that what we had in last 7 months is an unstable government, because most of the members elected by under the Mahinda Chintana. So always they are disturbing, to do anything, wrong or correct or wrong, any decision by this UNP government, UNP ministers. So, but they cannot do anything. So, they cannot do any reforms. So just they are doing just day-to-day work. I think we have to think and think a bigger picture of development. I think after the 17th of August.
Just before you wrap up, Dr. Saranamuthu, I'd like to ask you this as well. Which do you think, for the country at the moment, for the citizenry, which do you think is more important? Focus on economic vision and economic policies to ensure that the people of the country are able to take care of themselves, or structural reforms, changing the constitution, making democratic progress?
I don't think you can separate the two. I think it's an absolute false dichotomy that you can separate the sort of political and the economic. In any case, what you're asking me is a political choice, whether one gives greater emphasis to X as opposed to Y. As Amartya Sen has shown, democratic countries are the ones that can feed their people. When you've had shortages, etc., you found out that it's been lack of information, it's been a failure of democracy. Where there has been no democracy, you need that sound structure within which an economy can take off and can be sustained. So I think the two go hand in hand. You can't choose between them.
But what I'm actually trying to say is this: can you, while the economy is faltering, pursue reforms?
No, I don't think. Well, you have a very serious political challenge with you. The absolute sine qua non with regard to reform is that you have the people behind you, that you have the people with you with regard to that. Now, if they are then concerned about the cost of living, etc., then that's going to detract, and it's going to then pose a great challenge to the success of that particular process. So you do have to carry the people with you.
Faz, one final question before we wrap up this session.
So, is the message to the people for this election perilously close to a reversal of the change thus far achieved. Is that the message?
I will put it differently. Finish what you started in January 2015.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Finish what you started on the 8th of January 2015. We're going for a short commercial break. When we come back, we have the final round.